2021 early. Dan served in the Wisconsin state government as Assistant Deputy Attorney General and Senior Counsel. His government service also included appointments as Deputy Solicitor General and Assistant Attorney General under the Walker administration, I believe. Yep. Correct. Okay. And also, he has had cases before the Wisconsin Supreme Court in the 7th District. He's a graduate of Hillsdale College, and I think a lot of us are impressed with that. I would love to have gone there, just to have gone there. And also Valparaiso University School of Law. So I'm going to let him tell you a little more about himself and Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty. I'm sorry, this is kind of a bungle.
That's okay. Well, Eric's going to say a few words first.
Say something real quick.
Okay, fine.
Thank you for that, Sue Lynn. My name is Eric Searing. I am the Director of External Relations for the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty. And people ask me, what is that? And I'm a non-attorney paid spokesman, is how I describe it sometimes. So I have the wonderful privilege of working with folks like Dan and other members of our legal team in terms of spreading the word about what we do. Just real quick, show of hands. How many people in here are familiar with Will? So, quite a few. All right, well, great. So we were founded about 10 years ago in Milwaukee, and as Sue Lynn said, we're a nonprofit law, and we also do public policy, and so we get into some other issues aside from legal issues. We wade into the issue of education policy and other free market issues as well. It's not always just law and litigation, but that's what pays the bills. So it's what we do best. So anyways, real quickly, I am going to pass around a clipboard here. If anybody is interested in getting more information from us, or if you want to get our emails and other updates that we're doing, I'd really appreciate it if you just give us your name and email address, and we'll keep in touch with you that way. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dan. So, thanks.
All right, thanks, Eric. I've done this talk a few times, and I just want to warn you, it does make people very angry and anxious, because I'm going to tell you about what we've been seeing in Wisconsin, and it's not pretty. And you're not going to hear this from anywhere else. We're the law firm that is receiving most of these complaints, and we get them on our referrals on our website all the time. So as Eric explained, we basically support the rule of law, free markets, individual liberty, and we do this through litigation and advocacy and research. One of the new projects we have, which we just started earlier this year, is called the Equality Under the Law Project. And there's a brochure over there that you're free to take. Also, you can go to our website, which is defendequality.org. And so far, our track record has been pretty good. We have gotten 2 injunctions against the Biden administration. We were the first law firms in the country, first lawyers in the country to get injunctions against the Biden administration for the Farmer Loan Forgiveness Program. So Adam Faust is a farmer who lives in Chilton down the road. He owns Faust Farm. Some of you might know Adam. He's a double amputee, and he has a dairy farm over there. He has loans with the USDA, but because he's white, he's not allowed to have his loans forgiven. If he was black, his loans would be forgiven. So Adam, we got farmers from 12 states, 12 farmers from 9 states, all the way from South Dakota down to Kentucky. And we organized them. We filed a lawsuit in front of Judge Griesbach, and he issued an injunction preventing this race discrimination against farmers. We're the first in the country. Second big injunction we got was against the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So our restaurants were hurting very bad because of COVID. And so first thing Joe Biden did when he came into office was he set up this fund was to help restaurants, right? But guess what? Not white restaurants. So we had a restaurant owner that was our client from Tennessee named Tony Vitolo. He runs Jake's Bar and Grill. He owns half of his restaurant. His wife, who is Hispanic, owns the other half. But because she doesn't own 51% of the restaurant, he was denied a $104,000 grant. We won the case, and Tony got his money. Tony got $104,000. We enjoined the program. The race discrimination stopped. We've also have a case pending right now, which is a scholarship case. The state of Wisconsin is a scholarship several scholarships that are only available to non-white students. Actually, they're very discriminatory against most Asians are ineligible. If you're from Japan, for example, you can't get this scholarship. Or you're from Thailand. Our client is named Kiki Rabidna. She's from Thailand. She's ineligible because she's from Thailand. If she was from some other country like Vietnam, she would be eligible. But Wisconsin has a number of these. University of Wisconsin has this. We're trying to root out race discrimination for everybody in scholarships. We also have this lawsuit against the Madison Police Oversight Board, which has this quota system where if you're white, you're only eligible to serve on 2 seats on an 11-person board. 9 seats are reserved for non-white people, so we're suing over that. And then we are doing a lot with CRT. So I think you've probably heard a lot about CRT, and it's very confusing because the left likes to make it confusing. They like to tell you there's no CRT here. What are you talking about? You're crazy. There's no such thing as CRT. It's like Sasquatch. So I don't want you to think about CRT and is basically what the definition is, because if you try to get in a definitional fight with these people, you're going to lose, because they always change definitions of words. By the way, the dictionary just updated today. I don't know if you've seen this. The definition of anti-vax has now been updated to people who are opposed to vaccination and also people who oppose mandates for vaccination. So the left always is changing definitions, right? So what I want you to focus on when you think about CRT, you want to think about what CRT does, not what it is, all right? So basic concept of CRT is that the system that we live in America is rigged against non-white people, okay? And you can see this because there's disparities in different things. Like there's economic disparities, there's health disparities, and the left says this is proof. You don't need to look any further. There's racism baked into every system, from your police department to your school board to your grocery store. Everything's got racism. It's everywhere. We can't really point out where it is, but because there's these disparities, we have to undo the entire system, and we have to remake America in a system that is Marxist. Because if we have a Marxist system, a socialist system, we wouldn't have any racism. But what CRT does in practice, and what we're seeing in practice at will, is we're seeing a number of things. We see segregation. We've seen a lot of segregation. We've seen proportionality, which means that certain classes have to have certain numbers of people in them. We've seen the reduction of AP classes, talented and gifted classes, discipline reform, where people of certain skin colors are not disciplined. Benefits, certain awards are given to people based on the color of their skin. We've seen compelled speech, racial harassment, political indoctrination. This is sort of the laundry list about things that you should look out for and things that CRT does. So when you see it, you say, that's actually CRT. Okay, so these are the things you should look out for when you're in your community and you're being an activist. So I'm going to go through each one of these and give you some concrete examples of what we're seeing. Now, I have to provide a little bit of a disclaimer here. Some of these are public, and I will give you all the details, all the gory details. Some of them are private. People have called and told me about them and said, please don't tell me, don't use my name because I don't want to be retaliated against. I know some people who work at DPI, some people who work on school boards, some people who are teachers in schools, and they're deathly afraid of coming out. They're worried about getting fired. I think you can all appreciate that. So I will be vague on some of these examples. So the number one thing we're seeing that's the most troubling thing to me is a reemergence of segregation. The city of Madison and the Madison School District early this summer had a program called Dear Diary, which it was to help 8th grade girls who were coming into 8th grade to give them advice on how to be better students, what they can think about for careers, advice. It was not open to white girls. White girls were excluded from this program. Madison has also had several instances of racially segregated meetings where they want to talk to the community about certain issues, and they have a Zoom link for white parents, Zoom link for non-white parents. I also had a woman come forward to me who was a substitute teacher who went on a field trip that was segregated, and she said that they literally put the black kids on one bus and the white kids on another bus. And I said, did anybody think that sounded
The 60s.
A little bit ironic that you would do that in the name of equities. Middleton High School had testing where they put all the white kids in one class and they did testing. One of the teacher who was responsible for that had to resign. And also, University of Wisconsin-Madison had this welcome barbecue 2 or 3 weeks ago that was for only students of color. One parent told me a story about a music class, and the music teacher came in the room and said, "I'm going to teach you guys about racism today. You guys like playing with instruments, right?" And these were 6th graders, and 6th graders love music class, right? They love to play with instruments. And she said, "Okay, if you're white, you go over here. If you're not white, you go over here." She took all the instruments and gave them to the not white students and said, "Okay, for the entire class period, you're going to play with these instruments, and you white kids, you're going to watch, and you're going to know what it feels like to be the victim of racism." White teacher. Parents are definitely afraid of coming forward because one of the parents has a job situation and he's worried about his name getting in the press. So there's a lot of fear out there. Racial harassment is another big thing we've been seeing in a school district after the death of George Floyd. There was a Black Lives Matter video shown to the children, and these children were 4th graders. And the teacher at the end of the video says, "Does anybody have a question?" And a little girl raised her hand and she said, verbatim, "In my house, my parents say Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. Is that okay?" Okay? Is that okay? The teacher walked up to her, put her finger in her face.
No.
She said, "You're stupid and your parents are wrong." 4th grade girl. There's another teacher that we got a report from who is a white teacher in a 4K program. At the beginning of the year, she was provided training about the problem of white women teaching children of color. And she was provided with 2 puppets. This is not a picture of her, but this is a representation of the puppets that she was provided. And the school principal said, "This is Zeke and this is Zara. These are puppets and these are Puerto Rican. Whenever you need to tell the children something important, you put on the puppets and you tell them from the perspective of Zeke and Zara, because we don't need another white woman telling children of color what to do." That's racial harassment. Compelled speech. This is a picture of something called a struggle room. So CRT is based in Marxism. Maoist Marxism is Chinese. The Chinese version of Marxism had something called the struggle room, where every day you had to basically root out the problems about your neighbors not being Maoist enough. And so you had to stand up and basically confess your sins every day, and you had to root out your neighbors, and they had to root you out. And people would stand up and they point their fingers at you. There's a 4K girl who came home and told her parents that at the end of the day, her teacher made her stand up in front of class and explain her white privilege to all the other 4-year-olds. And the little girl didn't know what that meant, and the teacher said, "Now, your parents love you more because you're white. You know that? You know that? You have more toys because you're white. You know that? You know, you get to go on more trips because you're white. Do you know that?" And the little kid had to say yes to every question and then was permitted to sit down. Now, I don't know what this kids even think is happening. And hopefully a 4-year-old, this will leave her mind and she'll never think about it again. But from my perspective, it's pretty damaging. Awards and scholarships. Burlington had a holiday meal box that was provided to Hispanic families. I don't know what to say about that. Lots of people need food. Apparently only Hispanic people in Burlington need food. Sun Prairie Area School District has the Black Excellence Achievement Makers Award, which every year they have a parade, a banquet, and an awards presentation to children who are not white for being not white. And then this is a picture of Kiki Rabidna, who I talked about earlier. She was ineligible for a scholarship from the state of Wisconsin because she's from Thailand, and her son is is also ineligible because he's not the right type of Asian. We're seeing a lot of training curriculum. I have a whole database from basically, I think I'm up to maybe 40 school districts, training curriculum that's been given to teachers showing critical race theory. And this is from all over the state, a lot of red counties, I would say, many red counties, many in Waukesha counties. There's a slide there from Arrowhead School District that says there's no such thing as reverse racism, and that's what they taught teachers. That's just one example. There's hundreds of examples of critical race theory being taught to teachers. And I'll talk a little bit about how that's been happening and how it's been getting into schools. There's also been cover-ups. This is a slide from Sun Prairie's website. Earlier in the year, it says that they will have critical race theory in their classrooms. This was back before they came up with this mantra that there's no such thing as critical race theory in classrooms. And this slide, we took a picture of it, and then the next day it was deleted after this was posted on Facebook. They just deleted the words critical race theory. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw came out today, who is the person who came up with the phrase critical race theory, and she put out a report that says, absolutely, it's being taught in elementary school. We've devised a whole program for this. What are you talking about? She's proud of the fact that critical race theory is being taught in schools, or a critical race theory inspired curriculum, social justice, social emotional learning, all these buzzwords. So also the other part of the cover-up is that school boards are charging more and more in records, and they're giving parents the runaround on records. We put in a request to Madison School Districts, Metropolitan School District, for some of the records related to, I think, 9 teachers, some of the curriculum they were teaching for 1 year, and they sent us a bill for $10,000. We didn't pay it, but we ended up getting it after we squawked a bit. But if you're a parent, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to have to call us or the Wisconsin Transparency Project to try to get a lawyer. So what's happening, how is this getting in the schools, is I've been hearing through people who work at DPI, is there's basically 2 ways that critical race theory has been getting in schools. One is through what's called a corrective action plan. So this happened in Kyle School District, in Kyle up near, I guess, in Door County. They had a racial complaint. One parent said, my son heard the N-word in the hallway. The school board took the complaint, did the investigation as they should. It's never appropriate to say the N-word in a school ever. And the investigation went through. The school board discovered that one African-American student said it to another African-American student, and they closed the case. ACLU got involved and said, well, this is just evidence of all the inequities. You've got so many equities, I can't even tell you how many inequities you've got. And we're gonna take this to DPI. So DPI looks at ACLU's letter and is like, wow, this school district's all screwed up. I'm gonna order them. They have to hire one of these groups. So there's Great Lakes Equity Center, ICS Equity. ICS Equity is probably the biggest one in Wisconsin. Or culturally responsive something, student leadership. Now I've heard that in Manitowoc you have another, what is it called? DeGroot. So that's another one. I've heard these. So these for $42,000, right? They'll come in, they'll brainwash your teachers for you. So they'll teach your teachers about how they need to treat all the kids based on the color of their skin. That's the training. That's the training. You teach children based on the color of their skin. Social emotional learning. Go ahead.
What do teachers do who don't believe in that but are being told they have to teach it?
We're working through that issue. I know one teacher right now who's probably in the process of getting fired because she will not say that she believes in white privilege. She won't. She says she does not believe in systemic racism the way it's defined by the school district. So yeah, that's what would be called compelled speech. You're being compelled to say something you don't believe, and that's a violation of the First Amendment. You don't have. Well, also in Wisconsin we have something called the freedom of conscience. It says actually right in our Constitution. You have a freedom of conscience. You get to, right next to the freedom of religion. You get to believe what you want to believe. It doesn't even have to be religious. The government can't make you believe something. And these teachers are being forced to believe things now. You can't just teach it. You have to believe it in your heart. It's like a religious thing. You have to accept Jesus into your heart, right? So it's like you have to accept critical race theory into your heart. That's a lot of religious overtones to critical race theory. Other stuff we're seeing that's coming down the pike, probably coming down to your school district. Sun Prairie Area School District just got rid of final exams because, can you guess why?
They're racist.
They're racist. They are racist. So no more final exams. I have heard rumblings about getting rid of gifted and talented and getting rid of AP. It's happened in New York City. New York City is starting to do that. So I think you see it elsewhere in the country. It trickles here. So that's not, and that's getting rid of AP and getting rid of gifted and talented is on the table and discussed in these trainings that your teachers are hearing. This is on the table. These are in the books. I've read the books. I've read the articles. This is not, no one's trying to cover this up. So also school discipline. Will, you should go to our website. We put out a couple days ago a report on equity and discipline and about what the Obama administration did with, what is that called, where you're supposed to, PBIS, positive behavioral. So they were basically trying to get rid of discipline in the schools to reduce disparities. And we did a study, and it's on our website, that talked about how when these processes and procedures were implemented by schools, students felt less safe. Not a big surprise. Students are feeling less safe now because they feel like the rules are not being applied to everyone equally in the school. And of course, they're getting rid of police in schools. That's Madison kicked out police officers in their schools. Milwaukee just kicked out police officers in their schools because all cops are racist, right? That's all part of the deal. And I know you guys are probably interested in more than CRT, but there is more coming down the pike for your kids. One is obviously the mandatory vaccine mandates for children in California schools, and if that's is allowed there, it will probably be expanded here. They're going to try to approve the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. Also, if you work in an employer with more than 100 employees, it could be a matter of just a few days before your boss has to require you to vaccinate or do a weekly test. Spoiler alert, though, there's not enough tests to do weekly tests, and so you have to get the vaccine anyway. So lots of people are quitting. Famously saw Southwest airline pilots quitting. So there's been a lot of sort of resistance to the vaccine mandates. Also, this Minocqua Brewing Company is filing these lawsuits around the state, trying to blame school boards for not masking kids and saying, well, of course these kids are getting COVID because you don't have masks. So that's coming down, and although we think it's meritless and should be dismissed, what we're concerned about is that the school boards are going to basically cave in and settle these cases and say, oh, big scary federal lawsuit, we have no defense to this. Where do I sign? And then when the voters come and yell at them, they'll say, first of all, they'll say you're terrorists. And when they're done calling you terrorists, they'll say, hey, well, this was a big scary federal lawsuit. It's so complicated. Our lawyers told us to sign this document. Now we have to mask up everybody forever, and we also have to hire more CRT consultants.
Until everybody gets vaccinated.
Yeah, tell everybody, once we just get vaccinated, everything will be fine. And then the booster. If we get the booster,
But then the booster after that.
it's going to be lots of fun.
I have a question about Minocqua Brewing Company.
Yes.
From a legal standpoint, and some of the things that they have been posting on their Facebook page and lawsuits and threatening people about signing the recall, is there any kind of election not discrimination, but intimidation that we could maybe pursue as a legal route?
Because of the lawsuit trying to intimidate people, basically?
Just the things that they're saying on their Facebook page and possibly some public signage that they put up
Right, so, you know, we want to be really cautious with the First Amendment. The way we battle their stupid speech is to have more speech on our side, right? And when they threaten you, like the Department of Justice says, you're going to be labeled a terrorist, we're going to send your name to the FBI, this should not stop you from going to a school board meeting. You're allowed to go to a school board meeting. You're allowed to threaten that I'll vote you out of office if you don't do what I want. Anybody can say that. You can't obviously threaten any violence, which only an idiot would do. So
Unless you're a Democrat.
unless you're threatening the Waukesha school board, which got rid of school lunches, then you can threaten all those people and make them have security outside their houses. We didn't hear anything about that, but you make some school board members feel uncomfortable when you talk about CRT, then all of a sudden you're a terrorist. So yeah, I would say more speech. The Lodi School District superintendent said, or school board member sent an email to a member of the public, said, I don't want you ever to email me again at my address here at school, my official school address. I don't want to ever hear from you again. If you do, you know, you're going to regret it. And they called me and said, what should I do? I said, send him another email. What is he going to do? Call the speech police on you? I mean, you're allowed to send emails to people's official correspondence. Yes?
So one example is there's a billboard circulating that says, warning, signing recall may kill a kid. That would be the reference that
Oh, yeah. Well,
so
Isn't
it's
that a threat?
suggesting signing the recall would possibly kill a kid.
Yeah.
yeah, well, you know, if we didn't get Obamacare, millions of people were going to die.
Yeah.
If you don't get the vaccine, if you don't wear a mask, your neighbors are going to die. I mean, we hear that all the time. I'm not condoning what they're doing. I think it's dumb, but that's a political issue. Like, they're making a political statement that's wrong, and they're trying to get people angry. Now, if they put up a sign that says, if you sign the recall, I'll kill you. I mean, that's a threat. But yeah, just making a claim that we've heard this in the last 20 years from Democrats. If you don't take certain positions, people are going to die. So
that's why they keep saying it, because it's protected under the First Amendment.
yeah, it's freedom of speech. You can say dumb things. So we need to say smarter things on our side. Yeah, go ahead.
Is our state worse because we have a Marxist governor? Or was it like this with Governor Walker?
So as far as CRT in schools, it was not. It's hard to find the beginning of CRT in Wisconsin schools. It certainly did precede George Floyd's death. There were grants that were going out from Tony Evers' superintendent administration to get people to try to do some of this CRT, but it was, I would call it mild salsa, okay? It's mild, okay? Now we're getting the spicy, we're getting extra hot salsa right now. And a lot of this is because of the riots and the racial discord, and it's just been put into overdrive. And Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is getting in, these teachers are reading this and it's getting in their mind, and they're devoting themselves to this theory of anti-racism.
Ideology.
It's an ideology. It's a religious belief. They believe it in their heart that they have to do this work every day to get rid of their racist stain that's infecting all the systems that they're a member of. And at the end of the day, the answer to all these problems about how you're a sinner is equity. And equity is reverse discrimination. That's all it is. It's treating people differently based on your race. That's what equity is. Yeah.
Can this ever get to the point where a civil rights issue has arisen in that we did civil rights to elevate the African American community, and now are they breaching this civil rights?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that in a second here. This is our nation was founded on the principle of equality. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Okay, it was 1776. So then we go to 1863, November 19th. It was 7 years ago. Our fathers brought forth upon this continent, a new nation conceived in liberty and devoted to the principle that all men are created equal. So that's Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg dedication. And then Martin Luther King, 100 years later, August 1863. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will grow up in a country where they are not judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. So these principles are deeply embedded in our law and our history, and in 1964 the Civil Rights Act was passed, which says that there can be no race discrimination, among other things. And those principles have been expanded into all sorts of areas, but our legal system is based on the principle of equality and non-discrimination. And equity runs headlong into that system. So our legal system is fine. We will bring lawsuits. There will be victories. I pointed out we've had victories so far this year. There will be more. But what they want to do is they want to tear down that entire system. What they say is that equality is actually part of the problem. That's part of the system that's creating these inequitable results. The free market, the nuclear family, principles of rationalism, principles of science. The most anti-science people in the world are CRT enthusiasts. They do not believe in science. Ask them about the inequitable results created by the scientific method. They want to throw out the scientific method. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for them. It's inequitable. So, yeah, they want to tear down this is about tearing down our society. It's really no different than what's been going on since the 1950s. Yeah, this is just another flare-up. So I'm going to talk about what can we do, okay? So school board engagement, all right? This is number 1 on the list. You've got to get involved in your school board. Some of you are doing that already. You're getting this recall started, and you know, can't endorse a recall or anything, but recall is a method to get the attention of the school board. It is happening in Mequon and November 2nd. Arrowhead School District is starting a recall. Economawalk attempted a recall, failed, and the 3 school board members who were the subject of it quit. They couldn't handle the stress. Doesn't sound too bad. Kind of works. It seems like it works. I don't know. Another method that Kenosha tried, which is really sneaky, so I might tell you some sneaky things here. I don't know if they're going to work. I just tell you they are provided for in the law. There is something called the annual meeting your school district has every year. And at the annual meeting, all the electors, everybody who is a voter in that area, can come to the school board meeting and they can vote. If the school board members don't vote, the people who are electors vote. And you can elect your own chairman of the meeting, and you can do a whole bunch of things that are listed in the statute. It says, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about that. So there's 4 types of different school districts, and I was told, when I looked into, I was told that our school district was not one of those. Is that correct in what I found there? Is there ones that don't qualify for those annual meetings, or is that untrue?
I have to look at that, but I think every school district, what type of school district are they saying you are?
I think it was a union.
Union versus a common or something?
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that. That's interesting. Let me make a note about whether it applies. But
I'll touch base with you later, and we can talk about maybe what that is.
One of the things you can do at a meeting which hasn't been tried, well, what was tried in Kenosha is they cut the salaries of all the school board members. That's sort of like break things and shout at the sky, I mean, all it's doing is just telling the school board members you're mad at them. So, it doesn't really do anything, but it takes away, $4,000 a year from each one of them. Another thing you can do is it said you can vote on the type of textbooks you have. So I guess technically the voters could go to a meeting and say, we would like to vote on getting rid of any textbook in our district that has concepts related to equity, systemic racism, white privilege, all these sorts of things. You can make a list of them. I don't know if that will work. It definitely says in statute you can do that. So school board engagement, getting involved in your school board. That's number 1. So number 2, know your rights. Okay, so you really need, and this is the price of being a citizen. Okay, the burden is on you guys, right? We have had a cushy life in this country. We've had a very good life in this country. A lot of people have been able to work and raise their families and not need to know about any of the laws. That's the way it should be. But now, this new infection is going through our country, and so you have to learn your own rights. And so these are some things that I think that you should be aware of. Okay, one are the public records laws and the open meetings laws. Now the good thing about this is that the Wisconsin Department of Justice has put on their website a manual for open meetings and a manual for public records, and they're very easy to read. And they're very easy to understand. And you can go through there and see whether your school district is messing with you or not. And a lot of times they are messing with you. And I know this because I'm one of the authors of those that are still on Josh Call's website. I don't work there anymore, but those are still up there. So you can go to Wisconsin DOJ and search for open records and open meetings. Second, you should know about recalls. If you're doing a recall, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. You have to get 25% sign up of all the people who voted in the last gubernatorial election in your place, your voting district. So there's certain timing. You can only go for 60 days. You have to file something with the clerk. There's a lot of bells and whistles, but I know an attorney who's helping MEC1 and other districts, and so if you need an attorney, I can give you a reference for someone who knows exactly how to follow all these rules on recalls. But they're all laid out in Chapter 9. So we talked about school board powers in the annual meeting. That's in Chapter 120. So the way you can find any of these, so our Wisconsin law is called the Wisconsin Statutes. So if you go on Google and you type in Wisconsin Statutes Chapter 9, first thing that comes up is how recalls work. You type in Google Wisconsin Statutes Chapter 120. And the law is actually pretty easy to read once you find what you're looking for. But you can find and look at these and educate yourself about how recalls work, how school board meetings work. Another thing you should really know about is the powers of your local health officer. This is something we're seeing in a sort of an alarming way. In Eau Claire, we saw some little girl get quarantined. She was taken out of school, not by 4 police officers, but 4 police officers escorted her out of school because she has natural immunity and she didn't think that she needed a quarantine because one of her friends got COVID. But they took that little girl to court and got a court order requiring her to stay at home. So there are quarantine and isolation powers from the local health department that you should know about. One thing school officials cannot do, they cannot shut your schools down. That was a case that we won last year, and this year in July, called James versus Heinrich. And you can Google James versus Heinrich. Heinrich is the health officer from Dane County. And the Dane County health officer, where I live, she tried to shut down all the schools private schools. She had tried to shut down the private schools the Friday before they were set to open on Monday. She was like 5 o'clock, so we had to run to court. We got her order enjoined, and then we won the case fully in July. So you need to know what your local health officer powers are. You need to know what they can do, what they can't do. A lot of health officers are starting to go. We have put a letter out on our website that explained the powers of the local health officer. I think it was Racine County or Kenosha, where the local health officer went to the school district and said, hey, if this, and this happens, I'm going to close your schools. And we had to write her a letter and say, look, you can't close schools. We already had that case. No, you just can't do it. So be aware of local health officers. And you also have a right to inspect curriculum if you're a parent under federal law. We're going to have a state law passed on that topic. Has been passed, it might be vetoed. But a federal law does say that parents have a right to inspect curriculum under Chapter 20 of the U.S. Code. And then you also have the power to file a discrimination complaint. We'd like to see parents exercising this right when they feel like them or their students have been the subject of racial discrimination or treated differently because of racial discrimination. I have a client who told me about in Homestead, Mequon Homestead, about how they have this thing called the Black Girls Bathroom. And so there's a bathroom that's only open for black girls. And apparently the teachers know about this and agree to it. And so the first day of school, the kids gather around the bathroom waiting to see if a white girl walks in there. Because when she does, she gets beat up. And they think it's very funny. The freshman girls walk in there, haha, you didn't know that's the black girls' bathroom. So I talked to other parents about this, and they said, oh yeah, we have one of those in our school too. So this is no surprise. that child and that mother could file a discrimination complaint. It would go to the school board, and the school board would have to investigate it, right? And then then DPI has to review it. So there is a process if your child or someone you know is subject to a racial harassment or discrimination. So I think people should take advantage of that. The other side certainly is. What can we do? Oh, go ahead.
Is that also applied to religious discrimination?
Yes. Yep. All the, sex, race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, I think marital status, pregnancy status. There's a whole laundry list. It's chapter 118.13. So if you Google in Wisconsin statutes 118.13, it would give you the list of all the things you can do. Religious discrimination is definitely one of them. And it's good because it gives a process, so it makes the school board aware of it. Sometimes if you complain to the administrator, superintendent, he or she might just ignore it, sweep it under the rug. School board say, we didn't know anything about this. Like that Loudoun County, there's apparently that sexual assault in the bathroom last night, or in the school board member said, I didn't hear anything about a sexual assault in the bathroom. So that's another thing they tend to do is they sort of deflect, point fingers at each other. It's the superintendent, oh no, it's the school board. So legislation. So the legislature has passed Curriculum Transparency Act, which will help to draft and work with legislators to get passed. This says that that the outlines, handouts, lesson plans of a school teacher has to be posted online for everyone to see, so you can. What are they teaching in 3rd grade today? What are they teaching language arts in 6th grade? And you should be able to go in there because the teachers already make these documents, right? What sort of teacher would not have a lesson plan? It's not private, so why can't it just be put up on the internet, right? What's the problem? Apparently there was weeping and gnashing of teeth when we told the teachers that we were doing this. They said, oh, I can't possibly put up my lesson plan online. And they went to the legislature and they bellyached about how this would just destroy their educational system. But the legislature did pass it, so Governor Evers has to decide whether to sign it. Now there is something called public school transparency that was passed that we do believe Governor Evers will sign. So the amount of money that's spent in your schools, you can't really tell where it's going. But DPI has all this information about how much money per student is spent per building, how much money's coming in, how much money's being paid in certain buckets per building. And DPI has all that information, and DPI actually supported this bill. So this would put all that information online in a user-friendly database so you as taxpayers can go and see what's going on in each individual school. So we think actually Governor Evers will sign it because his DPI leadership, Jill Underly, supports it. So we think that will be a good win, a small step, right? Critical race theory bills. There was a bill called the Divisive Concepts Bill that Will did not support. That was passed. The problem with a divisive concepts bill is it lists things that schools can't talk about. Like, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. And the problem with that is it makes it subject to all these attacks like, oh, you say we can't talk about slavery. You say we can't talk about racism. You say we can't talk about the Holocaust or whatever. And it's hard to write a bill that does that without taking in too much. And so what we've been thinking about internally is an idea that basically says schools can't do very specific things, like they can't segregate students. Okay? We should all be able to agree on that. You can't separate whites and blacks in a class. So we think that there's certain specific things we can do that will be unobjectionable, and it will start to get at some of these critical race theory components, critical race theory in practice, the things I listed, what CRT does, get at some of those things with very specific and narrowly tailored laws. There's also a concept that I've talked to some legislators in Missouri who are taking one of our ideas. I have it up here. It's called a parental notification form. And it's we drafted this, and some people have given it to teachers. I think it made some teachers feel pretty uncomfortable. But it says, my son or daughter is in your class. In our family, we believe that all persons, regardless of race, should be treated equally. On issues of race, our family teaches that everyone should be judged individually on the content of their character, not the color of skin. As a result, I would like to be informed if my child is taught certain divisive concepts that may be in conflict with these fundamental beliefs. Please notify me in advance if you're going to teach any of these things. Systemic racism, unconscious bias, white privilege, whiteness, and you'll go through the laundry list. If you're going to do any of these things, let me know ahead of time. Privilege walks, affinity groups, implicit bias tests, goes through a list. And then it says, my request is simply for notification. I'm not saying I'm going to take my kid out of school. I just want to know when it's going to happen. And who could object to that? Who could object to that? That you don't want, that you would like to know if your child is being taught these things. That's all. Just for notification. I mean, this isn't Soviet Russia, right? You have a question?
Is that legally binding, you're saying,
No.
or that's something you're working on?
It's a letter that you would give a teacher, and you would see how the teacher would react to it. Because the teacher can react 2 ways. Of course I'll tell you.
And then
Or,
what would that tell them?
hell no, I'm not telling you. Then it would tell you what type of teacher you're dealing with. It would tell you what type of teacher you're dealing with. And so it's not binding, nothing about it, but it will tell you. I mean, I have 4 kids in public schools, all right? 4 boys. Our teachers go out of their way to tell us when things are going to happen in the classroom. If you want to come and sit in our class, whatever, you want to know when this test is coming up, please email me. I'll get. And teachers are so responsive. I just want to see if they'll be responsive on this stuff. I'm just curious. So we're sending this out and seeing what happens. So that's on our website, defendequality.org, under resources. You can download this, print it out, give it to a teacher, see what happens. Maybe you'll get a letter that says, "How dare you, terrorist?" Yes.
So it seems to me that a lot of this information has come to light because of the students being at home and the parents being able to look over their shoulder at what their children were being taught through the online coursework.
Right.
So is there any movement at all toward putting cameras in the classroom? And if not, could you put a body cam on your kids, and when your kid's sitting in 3rd grade, you can see what the teacher is actually teaching? Or is that illegal? Is that illegal to film like that?
I think it's okay. I can't speak for Will on this topic. I don't think that Will would support cams in the classroom, frankly.
Okay.
Personally, I think it's hilarious.
To put the body cam on?
I mean,
My kid would have a body cam and I'd be watching what's going on.
Not that it's actually going to happen. Not that it actually would ever happen, but it just raises this issue of like, well, what are you afraid of?
Correct.
But there are actually cameras in a lot of classrooms for safety purposes. For safety purposes. I don't know what conceptually the problem is. I guess they could say that there are students have privacy rights, and if little Johnny raises his hand and says, I got lice, then all of a sudden the whole world knows about it, and then you just violated his medical privacy, I guess. I would like to know if he had lice.
Trained on the teacher. Right? Maybe the teacher has lice, I don't know.
My wife is a substitute teacher, and she said someone had lice in school. And she said, and one of the other teachers said, well, at least it's not COVID. And my wife said, oh, I'd much rather have COVID. It's like the scariest thing you could ever get. Okay, what can we do? This is the sort of last what can we do, and I'm happy to take any questions. We can do litigation, so we are involved in litigation. The questions you have to ask yourself is who's going to be the plaintiff? Who's going to put their name on this lawsuit? Now, we are representing some children in Kettle Moraine who are anonymous in Madison, because in Madison and in Kettle Moraine, the schools have a policy, and actually they probably have one here too, which says if your child is experiencing gender dysphoria or wants to transition their gender, the teachers have to actively deceive the parents.
Good.
Yeah, what? Yeah, that's right. What? Exactly. They do. And those are filed court cases. You can go read about them on our website. We have the actual policies. This is part of a national push to separate children from parents. This has been separating children from parents is nothing new with Marxist ideology. So we can bring those lawsuits on behalf of these children anonymously by their initials. So sometimes you can do an anonymous lawsuit, and we have a case pending at the Supreme Court right now about how far that can. So there may be a chance, if you feared retaliation, you could be anonymous, but it's not easy. So you have to figure out who you're going to be. Associations can sometimes sue. So like Brown County Taxpayers Association is a group of guys up in Rich Heidel and those guys. There are clients, they sue under their name because they can't get an association because they didn't necessarily want their own personal names on things. So who's the plaintiff? Who's going to be the person who's going to be a taxpayer can bring a lawsuit to? Say if your money's being spent on unconstitutional or illegal things, you can just be a taxpayer. You don't actually have to be harmed. But the best type of plaintiff for CRT is going to be a student or a teacher. So a student who was subject to one of the things I described at the beginning, or a teacher who had to endure this type of training. And there are some lawsuits around in Skokie, Illinois, and Missouri, and other places right now where there are teachers who are suing saying, look, you're telling me I'm bad because I'm white? That's race discrimination. It's right on your slides. Here's your slides. Here's the training materials. You say whiteness is a disease and you have it and you gotta get rid of your whiteness every day. I'm throwing the penalty flag. Okay? Yeah.
I know more than a couple teachers that, medical professionals, teachers, etc., they're obviously scared to lose their careers. What's a good way to go about actually talking to these professionals and getting them to a point where they will stand up and actually voice their concerns?
Yeah, I think it's a personal decision and it's scary, and I think we have to give a lot of sympathy to these teachers, especially the ones who are objecting, because it's not. I don't know if you've ever worked in a job where your boss didn't want you there, but that's not a pleasant place to be for anybody. It's not a good place to work. Not good for your mental health or anything. So yeah, I would think we need to show these people kindness and sympathy, but at some point, when it's between their personal beliefs and doing the right thing and losing their job, some of them may choose to lose their job. There is a teacher, I think this is public, from a school district in Wisconsin who went to the January 6th rally. He took a vacation day and went and came back. And he told his students, I went to the thing in Washington. It was no big deal. Then he started teaching the students. Well, all hell broke loose. And that teacher he's in the naughty zone right now. He's like, they took classes away from him. Now, he wasn't arrested. He didn't go in the Capitol. He didn't go anywhere near the Capitol. There's no allegation that he ever broke any laws. He was just there on January 6th, and he stupidly told the students about it. But now his job duties are changing. So that teacher, for example, will have to decide, like, how bad are the changes? How bad is the retaliation? Can I still work here?
Well, is there nothing that falls under the heading of discrimination?
Like a hostile work environment?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, he definitely could have a claim. He might have a good claim, but he has to ask himself: is he willing to do that? Are you willing to sue your boss? Are you willing to be the person who sued your boss? I mean, that's tough. I mean, think about people who are employed right now, and you're trying to find a new job. Would you want to be? If they Googled your name, they say, "Oh, dude, this guy sued his last boss." I mean, that's not an easy decision. But yeah, do you have a claim? Yeah, you have. And we've had lots of people come to us, and we have talked to them about possibilities of lawsuits, and they have backed down because they're scared. And I sympathize with them 100%. It's not an easy decision. So you also have to think about what is the evidence. So you can't just say, oh, they have CRT in our schools, lawsuit. That's not enough. You have to have direct evidence of some specific incident that was an act of discrimination. So I would say it's like a car crash. If you're going to sue somebody over a car crash, you have to say, okay, on this date, at this time, this person ran a red light and they caused harm to my car, and I injured my neck. That's a car crash lawsuit. You have to do the same thing. On this date and this time, this teacher said this thing that was discriminatory against me and it hurt me because of this. Or my job duties were changed because of this. Or my son or daughter was harassed on this day and this time with these comments and these statements, that is a big hurdle too. Some people just want to say, oh, CRT's bad, let's sue. We can't just sue over CRT. And then you have to think about what sort of claims you have. There's lots of claims. So the Constitution, we can sue under the Constitution, the state Constitution, the federal Constitution, and there's federal and state law that protect the principle of equality. Yeah.
How do you prove hearsay of conversation if you don't have affidavits?
Well, unfortunately, when you file your lawsuit, you don't have to prove anything. You just have to allege that it happened. So what we would have to do is go and take depositions of all these school administrators and teachers and put them under oath and ask them what they said on what date and what time. And what other people heard them say. And yeah, you can use hearsay in a court if the hearsay is a statement of the defendant. So if the teacher, when a criminal or who's charged with a crime or someone is sued in court, they say something and someone testifies, say, I heard Marilyn say this, and they say, objection, hearsay. You say, no, that's a statement of the defendant. That's an exception to the hearsay rule. So yeah, you can use hearsay against a defendant in a civil or criminal case. So yeah, you can get around that by, if there was a meeting, you could call the witnesses who were there and depose each one of them individually. What did you hear? What did they say? Are there any documents? Are there any recordings?
So when the teachers say things that are critical race theory, is it really their fault? It seems to me like the school boards or the schools are indoctrinating, or telling them to say these things. So can I go back to their bosses who told them to say these things?
Yes. So that's a very good question about who the defendant would be. Would the teacher be a defendant? Would the principal be a defendant? Would the school district? There's very specific rules on who you're allowed to sue and who you're not allowed to sue. Certain governments have immunity from lawsuits, and there's something called like qualified immunity, which is always going to be a hurdle. Like if you're driving home tonight and a police officer pulls you out of your car and punches you, and then you sue the police officer, the first thing the court is going to say is, does this officer have qualified immunity? Okay, and that's a hard hurdle to get over to bring your case. So these are big hurdles. When you're suing the government, I shouldn't say it's never easy. We take a lot of easy cases against the government. But there are challenges, especially in this type of lawsuits. There are challenges. I like to file lawsuits that we can file them and win them within 30 days. And hopefully when the vaccine mandate comes out very soon from the Biden administration, you're going to see something from us very quickly. So,